Shalom, Alvarim. Welcome to Thursday Bible Study. Let's just open in prayer now and get started. Father God, we thank you for the wonderful days that you give us, Lord. Despite all of the things going on in the world, we know that you are in control, and we are so grateful for that, Lord. And as we come together today, we are so thankful we're able to do so. And we just pray that your word is opened up to us, and we ask for your wisdom, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, we're going to start with the Book of Mysteries, Jonathan Cahn, and we're going to go to page 151. And this is called The Mystery Wrestler. It was evening. The school was having an outdoor tournament, lit up by torchlight. The teacher and I were watching a wrestling match involving two of the students. Why is wrestling included in the curriculum, I asked. Well, it's part of life, he said, even in God. We continued watching for a time before he spoke. Israel is the name of God's people. Do you know where it came from? No. From a wrestling match in the night. It's recorded that Jacob was alone and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of dawn. Finally, the man said to him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he said. "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob," said the man, "but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." And that's how the name Israel came about, the name of God's people and nation. It all came from a wrestling match. But the man who wrestled with Jacob wasn't just any man. Jacob would call the ground on which it all took place Peniel, which means the face of God, for he had seen God face to face. What happened that night was a prophecy. No nation has ever wrestled with God and man in this world as has the nation of Israel. And in that wrestling match contained the mystery of the Jewish people. They're called Israel because they wrestled with a man who turned out to be God. That is their prophecy. And so they've wrestled for ages with one particular man whose name means Messiah, and who in the end turns out to be God. They aren't the only wrestlers. The scripture says that everyone who is born again becomes a citizen of Israel. Israel, the wrestling nation, I said. Then we're all wrestlers. It isn't a bad thing to wrestle even with God, as long as you come to the point that Jacob came to the end of your strength, where you can do nothing else but cling to him and ask him to bless you. In fact, that's how most come to the kingdom, at the end of a wrestling match. And what about his people Israel? Well, they will come so as well in the end of the night, at the breaking of dawn. Is there something you're wrestling with God about or resisting? Surrender today to his will, and in that surrender, ask him for his blessing. Good stuff, huh? Good stuff. Okay, we see that he called that area, what we're going to be reading about today, he called it Peniel, and that is a form of panim, as we see on the board here. Panim is face. The interesting thing about face, if some of you have kind of followed me with the a little bit of the Hebrew, just touching on the Hebrew, you might see something in that word that gives you a clue about it. The ayim. Do you remember what ayim means? That's a plural. And that's interesting that face has a plural to it. There are 4 words in Hebrew that end in plural but are singular in use. And nobody really knows why. God just has created them that way. There's a mystery there, and maybe we can kind of delve into it. The other 3 words that end that way, life is plural, but we use it as singular. Mayim is water. To me, that makes more sense of being plural because it's, I don't know, it just does to me. I don't know if it does to you. Now, shamayim, you see water in shamayim, and that is sky or heaven, can be interchangeable there. But all 4 of those words are plural in writing, but as we use them singularly. So today we're going to be talking about panim, and Peniel, that he named the land, is face of God. Pen is a form of panim, and then he added El. El is God, so face of God. And that's why he called it that. Now, we're going to do a little review of last week, or not last week, the week before, because we missed last week. Chapters 29 and 30, we see that Jacob left home with a walking stick, not much else. It's possible that Rachel's nurse went with him, and the only reason we think that is when we come to a later chapter, she is with him at the time. So how she got there, it only makes sense that maybe she went with him. But we don't know for sure, but that's a possibility. So while he was walking with his walking stick, he stopped to sleep, and he chose an area that he didn't go into the city. He slept outside the city because it was such an evil city. And he had no bed anymore, and so he used a stone for a pillow. And that stone represents quite a bit. When we think about stone, we think about Jesus is the stone, Jesus is the rock. And as we follow that stone, he had the dream, and then he anointed that stone, didn't he? So that's a picture of God, really. And so we see that with the stone. Now, because God revealed himself there. And in that dream that he had, he saw the staircase. And we know that the staircase to heaven, angels were going up and down. And that is a picture, really. Of course, we understand that that's Jesus. The only way we can get to heaven is through Jesus being our stairway. But we see the angels coming up and down. And so we have that picture that God is sending his angels back and forth, helping us. They're his messengers. They relate news to us, prophecy, and they look after us. And so it was showing Jacob that God was with him and was helping him all this time. And he will reveal himself again in almost the same way in these chapters when we get to them. So he's seeing that picture and how God is taking care of him, and how the stairway is the only way to heaven. He saw God the Father at the very top of the stairway, and the only way to enter heaven. So Jacob built an altar to the Lord there, and if you go back to Genesis 12:8, this is the very same spot that Abraham had built an altar. In Genesis 13, returning from Egypt, Abram returned, and he offered a sacrifice there. So we see that that's really an important place. And it's called Bethel, which means house of God. And it remained throughout their early history one of the most important places in Israel, and one of the major worship centers. They even kept the Ark of the Covenant there for quite a time. And if we go to Judges 20, you can read about that. Now, Jacob was being led by God, and I think part of his dream was to show that God was with him, and so he was confident that he was headed in the right direction, that God would be with him. And that was confirmed when he reached the well, and he found his bride to be there, and he was just so thrilled to finally, after the long trip, to see that God had led him to the right spot, and also that was a wonderful thing. But he had to work for 7 years for the trickster better than him, more of a trickster than he was. And we remember reading that Leah was switched for Rachel, and so he worked another 7 years. So Laban got 14 years of work out of him, and still he had nothing to show for it except for his family, but no monetary value there. He just worked for Laban. Laban was doing quite well at that time. You can see why Laban didn't want him to go anywhere. Rachel was unable to have children. This was not God's will at this time for her to have a child. He was blessing Leah because Leah was unloved. And so we see her having child after child. And of course, Rachel was very unhappy about that, very jealous. And it was hard for her to be blessed seeing her sister getting all the fruit when she wanted a child so badly. And finally, we see that Leah seemed to accept, the fact of her life that Jacob was never going to be the husband that she had hoped and dreamed for. And she really focused on her kids, from what I can understand out of this. And she was, because of the names, you can tell that she's changing her attitude a little bit, and she's thanking God finally for all of his blessings upon her. As I say, he worked 14 years, and then he went to Laban, and he wanted his freedom. And of course, Laban wasn't ready for him to go. But Jacob had a plan, and I believe that God put the plan into his mind. And so he made a deal, and Laban thought it was a wonderful deal because he was going to get to keep all of the good livestock, while Jacob got the spotted or the streak that were fewer in number. Seemed to be a recessive gene, and so he probably didn't know about that, but he just knew that that's the way it was, that there weren't very many of them. And so he made sure that he got all of them out of the herds, and he took them 3 miles away so that they wouldn't mix. And so he was assuring himself that he was going to come out the best in this deal. But he didn't count on God blessing Jacob, did he? And so we find that for the next 6 years, Jacob just increased until he had herds of all sorts, and he had even servants. So he must have purchased servants with some of his money. And so he was quite rich by then. But Laban was doing all right, but he wasn't doing as well as he'd hoped. And so we'll kind of enter into that area with the next few chapters. Let's see here. I guess we're going to start with Genesis 31 today. I think I need to go back to this one here. I'm hoping we can cover 3 chapters. A couple of them are kind of short, and so we'll just kind of gallop along here. Jacob, in the next 3 chapters, he's going to have 3 confrontations. He's going to have a confrontation with Laban. He's going to have a confrontation with the angel of the Lord. And he's going to have a confrontation with Esau. So he's got 3 biggies coming up that's on his mind. Well, he didn't realize he was going to have interaction with the angel of the Lord. But that was just a little surprise for him, I think. But he did know that he was going to have to face Laban. And he knew he was going to have to face Esau upon return. And I think that was probably the worst thing in his mind. It was eating at him, because all he could remember is how Esau felt when he left. He was going to kill him as soon as Dad was dead. And so he doesn't know. It's been 20 years since this, and he doesn't know what has happened. He does know that Esau is now living in Seir. It's the area of Edom. It's just another name for it. And it's interesting because both names refer to Esau. Edom means red, and of course he was red. I think he was a redhead, actually. And Seir means place of the red hairy man. So with emphasis on hairy. Seir concerns hairy. So it's just kind of a funny little name when you finally find out what it really means. So we're going to start with 1 through 3 of 31. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob has taken away all of our fathers, and from what our fathers he has acquired all his wealth. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. So here he's increased all of his goods, and now we see that Laban has sons. Sons were never mentioned until this chapter. So the Hebrews believe that his wife was dead. He may have remarried. These may be other sons. We just don't know exactly the whole thing. We do know he's got some young sons here now, and they are looking at Jacob and thinking he's taking all of our inheritance. And so, of course, they ran to Dad, and Dad started thinking about all this, and his countenance changed. And the word countenance in Hebrew, of course, is panim. His face changed. His face dropped. And so when Jacob saw that, why, he knew that Laban's feelings towards him were not as good as they used to be. He's feeling a little bit jealous about the whole thing. So, verse 4 through 13. So Jacob went and he called Rachel and Leah to the field to his flock, and he said to them, now he took them out in the field where they'd have privacy, because he wanted to talk to them about this without ears around. And he said to them, I see your father's countenance, I see your father's panim, and it's not favorable towards me as before. But the God of my father has been with me, and you know that with all my might I have served your father, and yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not allow him to hurt me. If he said this, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. And if he said thus, the streak shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. And it happened at the time when the flocks conceived that I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. Then the angel of the Lord spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here I am. And he said, Lift your eyes now and see, all the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now arise and get out of this land and return to the land of your family. So he's revealing all of this to his 2 wives and explaining what has been going on. And I'm sure they have been aware of everything. And so Rachel answered him, and she said, Is there still a portion of any inheritance for us in our father's house? She's making that as a statement. She's realizing that her father hasn't been the greatest father to her or to her sister. Are we not considered strangers by him? We're just as much as strangers. He doesn't really care about us. For he has sold us and completely consumed our money. All these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it. So they are agreeable and they're ready to go. They're ready to leave the father who has never really cared about them or thought about them. And so Jacob rose and he set his sons and wives on camels. So he's got the go-ahead with them. He's ready to go. But this is a monumental task because of all the livestock he has, all the servants, and how's he going to get out of there without Laban knowing? Well, he has a plan. He's always got a plan. Jacob's got a plan, that's the thing. So he rose and he set his sons on camels, and this is after everybody's all packed up and everything. And he carried away all of his livestock and his possessions which he'd gained, his acquired livestock which he'd gained in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep. So now we know he'd chosen the right time. It was sheep shearing time, and it was off from the tents and everything. And so he was out miles away probably with his guys that, worked for him, or his sons and all. And they were busy, so they had the freedom to gather up and get out of Dodge. So that was what they did. Timing is everything. And so off they went, and let's see where I lost my place here. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's. So that all of a sudden we've got something else going here. Why would she take those idols? A lot of speculation there, but I think we can figure out why. Jacob stole away, and it says he bolted in Hebrew. He took off as quick as he could with with all of the kids and everything. And they got out of there. And it was unknown to Laban. Now here we see a new title for Laban, Laban the Syrian. Why is he called the Syrian? It's like pagan. It's telling us Laban is not a follower of God, because from now on, in many instances, I'm not sure all, but in I think most instances throughout the next 3 chapters, he's called Laban the Syrian. That way we know he is not a part of the family anymore. He's part of the Syrian culture, which was had idolatry as part of its culture. And so he was definitely a pagan. And of course, we also know that she took his idols, his family idols. And the idols were, they've dug them up and found them, and they're small little, mostly female nudes. And usually they have multi-breasts because they represent fertility. And fertility for the woman, to have many children, fertility for the crops and for the livestock. It was kind of a multi-fertility thing, And so they would pray to these idols and whatever, in hopes that they would have good crops and good families and all that. They depended on these idols to do that. And they also represented another thing, because each family had his own idols, and they were tied to the inheritance. And so we will talk about that a little bit later. But she stole those from her father. And so on 20 it says, Jacob stole away unknown, in that he did not tell Laban the Syrian that he intended to flee. And so he fled with all he had, and he arose and he crossed the river, and the river is the Euphrates, the Euphrates runs through that area, and headed towards the mountains of Gilead. Okay, we will now go to 22. Let's see if I want to go back through my notes and see if I've missed anything. Now, like I say, it's been about 20 years, onwards to 21 years. I think before they get through with the trip, it will have been 21 years. The kids at this time, Reuben is probably about 19 years old, close to 20. So he is considered a man, and then it's just stair steps down. But the boys are pretty close. Leah had one after another, and then the concubines had them interspersed, so they're just all clumped together. So, but we know now that Joseph is born already, and so he was about 6 or 7 at the time. He's the youngest of the 11. So, and of course, Dinah is mentioned, and she's maybe 9 or 10 or something like that. So here are all these stair steps, and so a lot of kids to keep an eye on, huh? And here we see they're on camels. He came with a walking stick. Now he's leaving with all of this wealth, and everybody's on a camel. So he's definitely made an improvement in his life, hasn't he, as far as his riches. I'm going to read 22 through 24. Laban was told on the 3rd day, and here we have the 3rd day again. It's interesting to look at these numbers. He changed Jacob's wages 10 times. That's kind of an interesting thing. And now we see 3 days later why he found out. He's told that they took off. And so he took his brethren, and probably just the guys that work for him, and maybe, I don't know if he had any brethren to speak of, but it was brothers in the community, like we'd say brother, even though it's not a brother. And he took him and pursued after him. He was really mad about this whole thing, so he took off in fury to catch up with this guy and try to get everything back. He didn't want him to go. He knew that God was blessing him. He knew he was going to lose those blessings himself, because he gets the residual blessing just being around Jacob and having Jacob work for him. And plus, we find out he's missing his idols too, and that's pretty big with him. But God, here I'll go back a little bit. He took them and pursued them for 7 days' journey. There's 7 days. And he overtook them in the mountains of Gilead. So when Jacob reached Gilead after 3 days, they decided to camp there and take a break. He was hoping maybe he was far enough away probably. But alas, here they came. And he caught up with them on the third day. On the 7th day. And so Laban that night had a dream, and God spoke to him and said, "Be careful, when you speak to Jacob, you speak neither good nor bad, neither tov, which is good, nor ra, which is bad." And so Laban, when he overtook Jacob, pitched his tent in the mountains, so they're both camped nearby each other. And then Laban finally went to Jacob, and he said, "What have you done? You've stolen away unknown to me and carried away my daughters like captives taken by the sword. Why did you flee secretly and steal away from me and not tell me?" And so here he's accusing him of kidnapping his daughters, inferring that they would not go willingly. And of course we know they did. And then he's accusing them of taking all of his goods, all of his livestock, which weren't really his, but he was just claiming everything as his. "And why'd you do this and not tell me? For I would have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrel and harp." Now, does anybody believe that? He makes it sound really good, doesn't he? That he would have just given them a big going away party. Sure. "And you didn't allow me to kiss my sons and daughters. Now you've done foolishly in so doing. It's in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night." See here, it says the God of your father. It doesn't say our God. He's letting it be known that he's not a follower of God. "But he spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither Tob nor Ra. And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house.'" And he's saying here, you're just pining away to be home with your dad. But why, I can understand that, but why did you have to steal my idols? See, now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, what really is important to him, his idols. "And Jacob answered, and he said to Laban, 'Because I was afraid, for I said, perhaps you'd take my daughters from me by force. With whomever you find your gods, don't let him live.'" So he's confident. He doesn't know that Rachel took those idols, and he's confident that they're not there. And he said, "Whoever has them, just feel free to get rid of them." And that's almost a curse, really, but he doesn't realize what he's saying. And we do know that it wasn't too much longer after that Rachel died in childbirth. So whether that's connected or not, we don't know, but it's just kind of curious. We just need to be careful what we say, because we don't know really sometimes what we are saying. And so he's saying, just go ahead, search them. And in the presence of our brethren, identify what I have as yours and take it with you. He said, if you find it, why bring it out here and let everybody see it. For Jacob didn't know that Rachel had stolen them. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and he went into Leah's tent, and into his two maids' tents, but he didn't find them. And then he went to Leah's tent and went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols and put them in a camel's saddle and sat on them. The camel saddle is kind of a weird looking thing. It's almost like a chair, and it's got a kind of an underneath part like a compartment so you can store things, and she put them down underneath that, and then she sat on it. And Laban searched all about the tent and didn't find them, and she's sitting there all this time on top of them. And she said to her father, "Let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me." So she was having her period. She claimed. She wasn't, but she was claiming that. And he searched but did not find the household idols. He wouldn't dare touch her because she was considered unclean. This is even before the Mosaic laws. That's just a part of the thing. They just considered women unclean at that time. And so it was almost like they could catch something. The men were just, no. So she knew she was going to be pretty safe that way to protect those idols. So he was frustrated that he couldn't find them. He was sure they were still around there, but he couldn't find them. He couldn't prove anything. So he had to finally give up, and it was really irritating to him. Then Jacob was angry when Laban showed up without him. He thought, aha, he felt like he was righteously in anger because Laban had done this. It was just one more thing that Laban had done to him. And he rebuked Laban, and Jacob answered and said to Laban, "What is my trespass, and what is my sin, that you so hotly pursued me? Although you searched all my things, what part of your household things did you find? Set it here before your brethren and my brethren, that they may judge between us both. These 20 years I've been with you. Your ewes, your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I've not eaten the rams of your flock." He took care of all of the animals and everything, and Laban had it that if any of them miscarried, it would be Jacob's loss, not his, through these 6 years. So he took every advantage that he could, but still God blessed Jacob. And he continues, and he said he didn't eat any of his flock. He only ate his own. He didn't fudge on anything like that. Or that was torn by beast, I didn't bring to you. If an wild animal got one of the beasts, that would have been considered Jacob's, and he would have replaced it with one of his for Laban. So Laban lost nothing all this time. And he said, I bore the loss of it. You acquired it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. And it doesn't matter how the livestock died, Jacob had to pay for it. And there I was in the day, the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. He was out there in all kinds of weather, taking care of all of those animals. I've been in your house 20 years. I've served you 14 for your 2 daughters, 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Here we see it again. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and my labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. And so Laban answered and said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, these children are my children, and this flock is my flock, and all that you see is mine. And you see, his greed is still there. From the very beginning, he's been a greedy person. And he's claiming everything. Even his own kids, he's claiming as his. But what can I do this day to these my daughters or my children whom they born? Now therefore, come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So he's finally given in. He's can't do any more. He knows he hasn't got enough men to take him, to overpower him and take everything. He's just going to have to let it go. And doesn't have his idols. He's really an unhappy guy. But because he knows that those idols are in there somewhere, he's in fear, because in that society, the idols represent the inheritance. And if you have the idols, you can claim when the father is dead, you could go back and claim. And this may be why Rachel took them. She may have taken them as insurance. In case there were problems along the way, Jacob could go back and get an inheritance. So this was the big thing with him. He wanted those idols back, but he couldn't find them. So the next best thing is to make a covenant with Jacob. He does know that Jacob is an honorable man, and when he makes a covenant with God involved, he knows that Jacob will follow through. And so he's got a plan to make a covenant. And so Jacob took a stone, and he agreed to do this, and he took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And here we have a picture of a stone again as a pillar, as a marker. And Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And so all of those that were working for him and his kids, he had them gathering stones. And they took stones and they made a heap of them, and they ate there on the heap. Whenever they made a covenant, eating together was part of that. It's just like the Passover, everybody is eating. When you break bread in the Middle East and you share that bread is going into your body, it's going into the bodies of everybody that's eating it. So you all become one. They see that as becoming one. And so that's, when you make that covenant, then you eat in order to, everyone, it's like blood brothers, they used to mix the blood together or something. So anyway, it all follows. So we always see this meal that they share, at the same time. So they ate there on the heap, and Laban called it, I'm not sure how to pronounce this one because it's not exactly, I don't think that's Hebrew, but I will just let that go because I'm not sure. But Jacob called it Galeed, and Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me in this day. Therefore, its name was called Galeed. Also, it was called Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. And if you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. So many people read this and they think, this is so beautiful. When we part, well, may God, be watching over both of us. That's not what it means at all. Laban is saying, don't come back and bother me. Don't come back and hurt me. And God is going to watch you and make sure you don't do this. And so that's what the compact, the covenant was all about. They were making an agreement. Jacob was leaving. He was not going to come back. He's not going to bring those idols back and claim anything. And he, along with it, he said, I won't bother you anymore. I'm going to go home. And so that's the covenant that is. So that's what he means. He said, God watch over you that you don't do any harm to me, and he'll watch that I don't do harm to you. And of course, he was told by God not to do anything bad. And so they made the agreement there. And Laban said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here's this pillar which I have placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness. I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. And the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and the God of their father judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Jacob. And Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his brethren to eat bread. Here they're eating bread again. And they ate bread, and they stayed all night on the mountain. Early in the morning, Laban rose. He kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them. And then Laban departed and returned to his place. And that's pretty much the end of Laban as far as we hear of him anymore. He's gone home, and we don't hear any more about Rebekah's family, Abraham's family in that area. They've gone pagan, and they're just, that's the way it is. So that's 31. We're going to continue now to 32. Let's see where I am here. Okay, we're going to read 1 and 2 and 32. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's camp. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Now, here is another encouragement from God. As he went on his way, he was able to see this encampment of angels. Now, that sounds amazing to us. But it's almost like Jacob's ladder in a different version of it. Here's an encampment of angels reassuring Jacob that he's going the right way, that God is still with him. We don't know the angels that are around us taking care of us. God gave him a glimpse that he's going to be all right. Now, why did he need encouragement at this time? He was getting closer to his brother, and he was in fear. And so because he just didn't know what was going to happen. And he had all the responsibility, but he was a changed man. And as we go through this, and as we see him meeting Esau, we will see how he's changed. And so it's kind of interesting to look at it that way. So here he's been blessed by seeing this encampment of angels. Probably nobody else saw him. I think, in my mind, I would think he was probably the only one that saw him. Might freak everybody else out to see something like that. And so Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir. So now he's got another plan. He's gonna see what's happening. He knows that he's living in Seir now. So he sent some messengers down there to feel him out and see what's going on. And he commanded them, saying, "Speak thus to my lord Esau." So here already we see that he is humbled. He's calling him my lord Esau. He's giving Esau a raised position above him by calling him that. And so he knows that his messengers will carry that through and give that message to Esau also, calling him Lord. And he says, "Speak to my lord Esau, thus your servant Jacob," and here again, the humbling, your servant Jacob. Okay, trying to ease into this and see how things are going. And he said, your servant Jacob says, "I have dwelt with Laban and stayed there until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male and female servants. I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find favor in your sight." He's hoping for forgiveness, but he doesn't really count on it. It's just like, we always hope for that, but we can't believe it really would happen. And then in 6 it says, the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he was also coming to meet you with 400 men are with him." Oh boy, that doesn't sound good at all. Usually when 400 men are coming with him, it sounds like an army. It didn't say there were a whole bunch of women with him or his family or anything. So he's really worried. Now, when he came from Syria, which is Padam Aram, where Laban lived, there I go, I knew I was going to do that. Up in here, he came down through here, and he crossed. Now here's the Jordan River here, and he crossed over into here, and we're going to see him. He's right in this area right here. Gilead is up in here, and we're going to see him. He's crossing over. Now, Edom is way down here, so Esau is coming up this way, up like this. So I think he's going to try to get the best position he can to protect himself. So here he's got the news now. His brother's coming with 400 men. Doesn't sound good. Now he's got to have plan B. He was afraid of this. So let's see what he does. Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that were with him, the flocks, the herds of camels, into 2 companies. And he said, "If Esau comes to one company and attacks it, then the other company which is left will escape." So that's his plan. If you divide, at least half of them will have a fighting chance. And then Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac." Here we see he's praying. He's got his plan. Now he's going to pray. And of course, that's really good. Before you take any real action, you really need to pray and make sure that God's got you going the right direction. And who said to me, "Return." Now he's reminding God what God said to him. He said, "You told me to return to my country and to my people, and I will deal well with you," you said. "I'm not worthy of the least of all the mercies and all the truth which you've shown your servant." He realizes that God is in control of everything and that he doesn't really deserve anything, but God has been gracious to him. "You have shown your servant For I have crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I've become two companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother of my children. And you said, I will surely treat you well and make you descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So he's reminding God, you told me all this, you told me to come, and you said you promised all these people would be in my family and everything, and so I'm counting on you to take care of all of this. You notice he didn't say, I pray you change the heart of Esau. He kind of forgot that one, didn't he? Because I don't think he thought that was going to happen. I think he's thinking, you just need to protect me from this guy that wants to kill me. So he lodged there the same night, and now he's going to have his second confrontation with the angel of the Lord. And he took what came to his hand as a present from Esau, his brother. Well, he hasn't camped yet, okay. So he's decided he's going to send some things to his brother, and maybe that'll kind of make his brother think twice and forgive him. And he took 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 male goats and their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 foals. And then he delivered them to the hand of his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, pass over before me and put some distance between successive droves. And he commanded the first one, saying, when Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong, and where are you going? Whose are these in front of you? Then you shall say, they are your servant Jacob's. It is a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he is behind us. And so he set up a group of people, his servants, with some of the flocks that he had as gifts. And then pretty soon there'll be another one coming along. So I just one after another. Instead of them all in one group, he just kind of kept pushing them on. And so that was his plan. So he commanded the second, the third, and all that followed in the droves. So there were a lot of groups of animals he was going to give his brother. All who followed the droves, saying, in this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him. And also say, behold, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face, panim. Perhaps he will accept me. So the present went on before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp. So now we're getting down to the camp where he's going to be wrestling. He arose that night, and he took his 2 wives and 2 female servants, his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook. And he sent over what he had, and Jacob was left alone. So he's kind of sending them out of the way a little bit, across the brook, a little bit of safety there, and all the crops and everything, all the livestock and everything are taken care of too. And he stayed there alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. So all that night, angel of the Lord wrestled with Jacob. Jacob was persistent. As tired as he was getting, he just wouldn't give in. It wasn't like the angel of the Lord couldn't overcome him, but he was wrestling. He was waiting for him to give in and say uncle. He didn't want to say uncle. But finally, he said, I won't let go unless you bless me. And so the angel of the Lord said, what is your name? As if he didn't know. He wanted Jacob to say, heel catcher, trickster. And he said, your name shall no more be trickster, but it shall be Israel, for you have struggled with God and with man and have prevailed. And that's what Israel means. Then Jacob asked, saying, tell me your name, I pray. And he said, why is it that you ask about my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, the face of God. For I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. He can't believe it. He actually saw God, and he lived through it. Just as he crossed over Penuel, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. Forever after, he had a limp. He had to remember that time that he wrestled with God all of his life. And if you've ever had a joint out of place, you know how painful that can be. So he had that painful reminder all of his life. Therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shrank, which is in the hip, on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the muscle of the shrank. Now, it doesn't say in the Bible, Moses' law doesn't require that at all. It's just something that they do because of this verse. So, all right, now we'll get to 33. So we still got one more confrontation coming up. He managed to survive wrestling with God, and he took care of Laban with God's help. So now he's got... Yeah. Yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Okay. Chapter 33. Now Jacob lifted his eyes, and he looked, and there Esau was coming with him, 400 men. So here's his plan. He's got another part of his plan. He divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 maidservants. So he's got each mom with her brood. And he put the maidservants and their children in front. And Leah and her children behind. And then Rachel and Joseph last. So he hasn't fallen far from the favoritism, has he? He's just like his dad and his mom. He's got his favorites, and he's certainly, and these kids, they were old enough to know what was going on. They knew how important they were and who was the most important. And as we get in another 3 or 4 chapters, we're gonna see how they feel about the whole thing with Joseph. So he's trying to keep them as safe as he can. And he crossed over before them, so he got them all situated in that way, and then he went into the front of them. He led them. He was going to try to protect them. He bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came to his brother. So as he was going, he'd bow down, and then he'd go a little further, and he'd bow down. He did that 7 times to his brother. But surprise! Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. So he wasn't the only one that changed. Esau had changed his attitude too. God had worked in his heart. He was a rascal, there's no doubt about it, but he changed his heart towards his brother. And so that's a wonderful thing. He lifted his eyes and he saw the women and children. He said, "Who are these with you?" And so he said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." He's given all the glory to God. Everything he got from God. And then when the maidservants came near, they and their children bowed down. And that shows that he'd been training them correctly, that they were respectful. And so they were respectful towards their uncle. And Leah came near with her children, and they bowed down. And afterward Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. And Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company which I met?" And he said, "These are to find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." And Jacob said, "No, please. If I've found favor, if I've found grace in your sight, then please receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face, panim, as though I had seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. You have forgiven me. Please take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." So he urged him, and he took it. And the word urge is, he pecked at him. Remember, that's what Lot did to the angels. they said he pecked at them until they agreed, and that's just a euphemism that's used in Hebrew in order to really urging them on, to peck at somebody. So he finally agreed to take them. And then Esau said, let us take our journey and let us go, and I'll go before you. So he's offering here to go along with them and kind of help him out or whatever. But that's not Jacob's idea. He doesn't want that. Jacob said to him, my Lord knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and the herds are nursing and with me. If the men should drive them hard one day, all the flock will die. Please let my Lord go on ahead of me before his servant, and I will lead on slowly at a pace which the livestock that go before me and the children are able to endure until I come to my Lord in Seir. Now, he never does go there, but maybe he's intending to, and it just didn't ever happen. So that's why it's mentioned there. And Esau said, well, let me leave with you some of the people that are with me. He was going to, and this is a permanent thing. Let me give you some of these guys to stay with you, and they'll just be yours. And he said, no, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. Esau returned that day on his way to Seir, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth because he had crossed over. If you remember, he had crossed over into here. He's going down on this side instead of going down there because he's going home to Israel, or to Isaac. So he's headed down this way, and Esau's going back home this way. So he journeyed to Succoth, and he built a house, and he made booths for his livestock. Succoth means booth or tent, and the feast of Succoth is in the fall. It's one of the 7 feasts, and it's also called the Feast of Tabernacles. That's probably the one that we recognize, but Succoth is the Hebrew word for it. And it's an interesting feast because that week, everybody is supposed to build a little booth or a little shanty type thing in your backyard. And the women go out there and they decorate it, flowers, and just make a little cozy little home for it, and they eat out there and sleep out there through the night. Of course, the winter or the autumn is mild, and it's a nice thing to do. And they just worship the Lord there and celebrate. But the one thing about that feast that's different from all the others is that they are to invite their Gentile neighbors to feast with them. So it is a picture of the church and the Jews coming together, eating together, and being together in the millennium. So it's really a beautiful feast. So here we see the word Succoth. And he built the booths or Succoths so the livestock would have cover. And so then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, in which is in the land of Canaan. And when he came to Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent there before the city, and he bought a parcel of land, and he pitched his tent which he'd bought there from the children of Hamor, who was Shechem's father. So Hamor lived there, and Shechem was a young guy that was the son of Hamor. And there Jacob erected an altar, and he called it El Elohei, Israel. So now we're all set up for chapter 34, which takes things in a whole different area. So they're living at Shechem, which is a Canaanite city, Canaanite people. And there's going to be some bad things happening, as we know in chapter 34, but they're just right there, and they're not watching the kids very well, in my opinion, not keeping control over things, and bad things happen when the young kids are out and about. So we'll find that out later. Anybody have any questions or anything that they want to talk about in these 3 chapters? Come on. Don't be shy.
You explain it so well.
Well, thank you.
In verse, chapter 32 and verse 30, it says, so Jacob called the name of the place Peniel,
Peniel.
for I have seen God face to face.
Mhm.
But I thought that no one has seen God.
Well, this was a pre-incarnation of Christ. In the Old Testament, before he was crucified and resurrected, before his ministry on earth, Jesus would appear to people in another form. And it's usually called the angel of the Lord. He came when Abraham had the 3 visitors. He was included as one of the visitors and talked to Abram, and told him that he was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And he'd sent the 2 messengers, the 2 angels, to destroy. That was one place where you see the angel of the Lord. This is another place where he wrestled with the angel of the Lord. And it calls him a man, but it's the angel of the Lord in this one. Because if you want to go to, let's see, I've got it written down here somewhere. There's another book, I think it's Hosea. I have a terrible time reading my notes, so I know it's in here. But there is a place that talks about this particular thing, and it says that it was the angel of the Lord that wrestled with him. Does that make any sense to you? Does that explain it? It's kind of hard for us to think about or understand, but God, we can't see God because we would die if we saw God the Father. But he represents himself through his Son. And Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And so when he talks directly in the Old Testament, when he talked directly to people, he would do that as the angel of the Lord.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope that explains it. Anybody have any other questions or comments or anything? We've got a while yet before Glenn's back. Oh, did you turn it off? Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, thank you. Well,
Sandra,
yes.
Hosea 12:4.
Thank you. Okay, Hosea 12. All righty, yeah.
I had also always wondered about that you can't see the face of God, you die, and all of those other places that say.
Yeah, you're right.
So I like hearing you discuss it.
Yeah, otherwise it is confusing, Yeah.
So when Moses wanted to see God's face, he had to go behind a cloud.
Yes, he actually saw God. The Father was up there, yeah.
But he didn't.
He never saw his
He
face.
couldn't
Uh-uh.
see his
He
face.
saw the hill of his, he actually saw the hill of God. It talks about that when he passes by Moses and he puts his hand there. Well, as he passes by, as he's going by, it talks about him seeing the hill of God.
Isn't
So
that
that's so
amazing?
cool. That made me feel that God was really real. And like, that's
Yeah.
many years ago. But, wow, he's
So when he
real.
went up on the mount to meet with God,
Yeah.
he didn't really get to see God.
Well, the people were scared. We don't want to have anything to do with this, They they sent Moses, but they couldn't even wait for Moses to get back before they were doing
And he
terrible
had to
things.
wear
But
that veil because
Yeah.
his face was showing.
yeah,
So when when God allowed the angel of the Lord to actually be seen in the few times that he did, it's probably even a really much, much bigger deal than what we
yeah,
even know.
right. And that's the one thing about the Bible, it just is it's just so simple when it tells us something, but it's so, if we were there, why it would be, just knock our socks off. Yeah. Well, if you have any no other questions, we'll just close up in prayer. And next week we're going to do chapter 34. I think maybe we'll take another couple of chapters along with it. I'm not sure how far we'll go, but if you want to go ahead and read ahead the next 3 chapters and just get prepared, why that will be your assignment for next week. And as we carry along, we're kind of wrapping up the family of Isaac, and we're going to be focusing on Jacob and Joseph, and that's going to be an exciting trip to Egypt. So we just thank you, Father, for allowing us to have a glimpse of the past, to understand all the plans that you have for us and how they develop throughout the years. And we just see this all as a big circle, that we're going to be complete again in a whole new world at the end of this circle. And it will be back the way you intended, Lord. And we just look forward to that. We look forward to your return. And we thank you again. In Jesus' name, amen.